All right, here we go. Let's get the microphone. Well, this thing's almost as old as Bryce. Anyway. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode, I think, 4 of the podcast. And I'm recording this a day late. I try to record and post, try to record before Tuesday and post on Tuesday. Today being Wednesday, and the reason that I'm posting and recording and whatnot a day late is that yesterday I dropped my phone and it was screen side down and it hit right in the corner and shattered. So I'm waiting on a replacement phone, and I've got this rigged up here in my shed. I usually record in the car, as you know, but here I'm in the shed. I've got my boom mic that we got for Bryce way back in the Bravey Boy days. Maybe we'll talk about that someday, but not today. Today we're going to be talking about, I have yet to figure this part out. Today we're going to be talking about White River Junction. It's a town that I've lived in for the past 22 years. My wife has been here for a bit longer than that. I've always known about White River Junction, having grown up in Bethel. But back in the day, White River Junction, and back in the day, for me anyway, so like in the 80s, White River Junction went through a little phase of being kind of scary and a little sketchy. At least that was the rumor and perception. A little further upstream in the Upper Valley, it was dangerous, the big city of White River Junction. And it's actually interesting that White River Junction is as the area is commonly referred to as White River Junction area, but really it's the Hartford, Vermont area. And Hartford, Vermont is a big section. It's a town, the town of Hartford, and the town of Hartford has within it a couple other smaller sections, one of which is White River Junction, but the others are Quechee, which we talked about the balloon festival in Quechee. Another one is Wilder, which we'll talk about at some point. There is Hartford Village itself. There is, of course, White River Junction, and then there is West Hartford. So those towns all make up the town of Hartford, Vermont. And they all have the same school district. They have the same police department. They have the same fire departments. Although Quechee has a little fire station out there. So White River Junction is the downtown portion of the area. It's where you'll find most of the commerce is located in that part of town. You've got several restaurants down there. One of my favorite restaurants is Big Fatty's. It's a Southern barbecue. Put some South in your mouth is their tagline, and I love that. Recently, they've started having steaks on Thursdays, and so I've got to figure out a way for me to get down there for a steak on a Thursday. So we got to make that happen. And there's also the Hotel Coolidge down there. There are some other new up-and-coming places, and maybe we'll do a feature in the future of some of the smaller entrepreneurial businesses that are in White River Junction. But today I want to talk about the railroad history, which is really why it's on the map, and then about some of the mill industry that happens there. And so this one's going to be a little bit longer. We're already at the 4-minute mark-ish. So White River Junction, Vermont, owes its very existence to the growth of the railroad industry, becoming a crucial transportation hub in northern New England. The village's strategic location at the confluence of the Connecticut River and the White River make it an ideal spot for converging rail lines. The first train to travel in Vermont, the Winooski, ran from White River Junction to Bethel, where I grew up, in 1848. In the 1890s, with 14 railroad tracks, which is just amazing if you go downtown and try to imagine where these 14 railroad tracks were. It must have just been crazy back then. White River Junction was considered the most important northern New England railroad village. Several prominent railroad lines converged in White River Junction. Just a minute. So several prominent rail lines converge in White River Junction, including the Vermont Central Railway from the northwest, Connecticut River Railroad from the south, connecting to Springfield and Hartford, Connecticut, Connecticut and Passumpsic Rivers Railroad from the north, extending towards southern Quebec, Northern New Hampshire Railroad from the east, connecting to Concord, which is interesting because that's southern New Hampshire. Woodstock Railroad, built later in 1875, connecting White River Junction to Woodstock, Vermont. I'm trying to think of where that one would have run. Must have run along where the current Route 4 is. That's all I could think. The arrival of these railroads brought significant economic development, fostering businesses, commerce, industry, hospitality services, and housing. The first depot opened in 1849, and the area quickly developed with car, machine, and locomotive shops, a foundry, and other related facilities. White River Junction is also known for its Union stations, which served multiple railroad companies. Unfortunately, these stations were repeatedly destroyed by fires, with major blazes in 1861, 62, around 1880, and again in 1911. The current passenger rail station, built in 1937, continues to serve Amtrak Vermonter and is contributing property to the White River Junction Historic District. There's an engine down there. I want to say it's engine 39. I'm not quite sure. I'll try to get some pictures of the railroad station and the old train that's down there. It's part of the Parks and Rec. While the peak of the railroad activity has passed, White River Junction remains a place with a rich railroad heritage, with the active station and historical remnants still visible today. Now, I've taken the train from White River Junction up to Essex Junction, Vermont, several winters ago. I took it to get up there for Penguin Plunge, for the Doink. All of a sudden I can't remember the name. The Vermont Special Olympics, they did a penguin plunge, and that's not what this is about. But I rode the train up there. I rode it north, and then rode it south at the end of the weekend. And it was kind of fun, actually, being on the train. And it reminded me of times I spent on the train out when I lived in Japan, when I was commuting by rail in Sacramento, California, and as well as being on train service and T service down in the Boston, Massachusetts area. So the train was kind of fun. I wish that it was more convenient to be able to travel to places around the area via train, because I would definitely take the train more often than I do now. So moving on to the mills in White River Junction. If you go down into town, into White River, there's some buildings that are distinctly remnants of old mill buildings. There are some that are now parking lots. And several years ago, I had 2 different studios in a building that used to be a mill building. And I took care of a patient while she was on hospice who was nearly 100 years old, who used to work in that same building. But it was bigger and took up a lot more real estate than it does now. So I thought that was kind of interesting to be there and to learn a little bit about what that place used to look like. So while White River Junction is best known for its history as a significant railroad hub, its location at the confluence of the White and Connecticut rivers also fostered an early mill history. Here's a brief overview. Early development in the 18th century. The potential for water power was recognized early on. As far back as 1765, land adjacent to river falls was granted to incentivize the establishment of saw and grist mills. By 1774, both were operational, bringing jobs and growth to the nascent village. Wood products. The abundance of hardwood forests, which grew back after early lumber clearing, talk about that later too, fueled a robust wood products industry. The Granville Manufacturing Company, established in 1857, initially produced butter tubs before transitioning to wooden bowls. In 1913, it began producing quarter-sawn clapboards, a product still made there today using traditional methods. So the only Granville Manufacturing Company that I know of is nowhere near White River Junction, Vermont. And it might not even be what I'm thinking of. I know that there's a place in Hancock, Vermont, which I think over the mountain borders Granville, but I'm not quite sure. Um, but all that being said, in White River Junction at this time, I don't know of any places that produce clapboard siding or bowls, except for artisan bowls that are produced out in the Quechee, Tapsville area. Textile mills, textile production also played a role. J.C. Parker and Company, for instance, produced fine baby flannel and other woolen materials. In 1870, this mill alone accounted for a significant portion of Vermont's woolen industry revenue, employing numerous workers and leading to construction of mill housing in the village. So earlier I just spoke of the building that I had a studio in that my patient worked in as a child. That is one of the woolen mills, and they used to dye the fiber there. They would also clean it to take out the little pieces of sticks and grass and leaves and twigs and whatever else the sheep had rolled around in before it was dyed and then moved along the process. Impact of the railroad on the mills. So while mills were important, the arrival of the railroad in the mid-19th century transformed White River Junction into a major transportation center, and this became a primary economic driver for over a century, like we've talked about. However, the existing mill infrastructure and access to raw materials and transportation via rail likely facilitated the continued operation and growth of some mill-related businesses. Decline and revitalization. Bum, 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 bum. Like many industrial towns, the mill industry in White River Junction, alongside the railroads, faced decline in the mid-20th century. However, the village has seen revitalization efforts in recent decades, especially in the past decade, leveraging its historic architecture and strategic location. There have been a lot of influx of new businesses, mostly restaurants, into town. Some may say that the restaurants don't really fit the people who used to live there, and some of the higher prices that are being asked for goods, services, apartments, real estate are starting to force out the people who lived there originally and generationally, and now we're seeing a large occurrence of cars in town who don't have New Hampshire or Vermont license plates, let's just say. In essence, White River Junction's mill industry was a foundational element of its early economy, driven by water power and abundant timber, and contributing to its initial growth before the railroad area cemented its status as a transportation hub. So there we have a little bit of history of White River Junction and Hartford Village here in my little corner of Vermont. Thanks for staying tuned. Hopefully this recording isn't way off from the style of recording from my car. I'm going to try and listen to them and see which one I prefer, and we'll move towards that. I kind of like this setup out here in the shed, although it's all this jumble mess behind me, but maybe I can do something about that. And I've got my little boom mic. It's so funny. What am I doing? Spending time peacefully out here in my shed, and I'm looking over here. My attention has been diverted because there are two chipmunks climbing up and down, chasing each other around a tree. Yeah, cool stuff. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your day or night, or whatever it is that you're engaged in today. And peace. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.